Brooklyn Independent Television.
My name is Brad Samuels.
My name is Alexei Lukian of Cherny.
My name is Wes Rosen.
I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and actually spent 5 years when I was a kid growing up in Tokyo, in Japan.
I was born in Kiev, Ukraine, and where both my father, as well as his parents, my grandfather, my grandmother, were all practicing architecture.
I grew up mostly on in the western states, Colorado, Arizona, California. I came to New York to go to Cooper Union.
Situ Studio was founded in 2005. We all graduated together at the Cooper Union. 5 of us were classmates there. This was in May, and we pretty much opened our practice in 2 months later in July.
We're a research design and fabrication practice located in DUMBO, Brooklyn. Right now we're in our studio space, which is equally balanced between an office and a fabrication shop. There are basically 2 sides of our practice, fabrication and design, and the line between the two is often difficult to define. On the fabrication side of our practice, we're mostly working with other architects, but also artists and some scientists. We're working with machines in our fabrication shop which take direction from computers, so we can easily go from digital models to actual physically modeled objects. And then on the design side of our practice, we are doing a range of spatial experiments, mostly architectural.
So the solar pavilions were 3 pavilions built in 3 consecutive years. They were commissioned by Solar One, which is a green arts and energy sort of think tank on the East River. And the first year, they have a concert series called City Soul, and they asked us to design a pavilion for that concert series. And basically, it was a sustainable mandate, and sort of embracing that, we salvaged cardboard tubes from carpet dealerships all over Queens and Brooklyn, ended up creating a pavilion which had ideas of passive solar orientation and material reuse. We were asked to repeat the pavilion the second year, and we took these ideas of cellular assemblies, sort of things which resonated with self-organizing systems. And so the second pavilion, all the material was cut in our studio, CNC routed and cut, and it ended up really being about not the design of an entire structure, but the design of a joint. So sort of arguably the only thing we designed in that project was a connection or a detail, and we tried to make that connection as universal as possible. And what that meant for us was that we didn't know how the pavilion was going to be organized or come together until we actually got to the site, sort of did some very crude circulation diagrams on the back of a napkin and started building.
I guess 2 years ago now, we began working with the Guggenheim on developing 6 models or installations for the Frank Lloyd Wright exhibition. We wanted to move away from traditional models where models would be displayed on pedestals or something, and we wanted to really engage the building, have the models or installations kind of grow out of the building. We were presenting work which hadn't been built in several cases, so it was important to have 3-dimensional representations of these projects so that people could go from the drawings and walk around an object and really understand how the space was functioning.
We've done a number of projects with Professor Adam Malouf in the Geoscience Department at Princeton, and it's been fascinating for us to work with geologists, mostly because we find that they're thinking about a lot of the same things we are, but just at a totally different scale, both in terms of sort of physical scale and also scales of time. I mean, hundreds of millions of years is sort of normal for him. And one of the first projects we did with him was to take the trace of his movements in India as he walked around a meteor crater over about a month and a half of field work that he was doing. And as he walked around the meteor crater, he had a GPS unit with him the entire time, and so at the end of that month he had in excess of 80,000 coordinates. Ultimately what we did with that project was to make a physical model of the meteor crater for him from that data set that was cut on the CNC router and bring it to a conference on impact craters. The crater is relevant because it's an analog for Martian impact craters. It's one of the few craters in the world that's actually impacted into basalt, which is the same conditions you have on Mars. The most recent project, and maybe the most sort of interesting one for us to date, is one involving fossils. He was in Australia doing field work and unexpectedly came across what looked like fossils that were embedded in limestone. What was interesting for him was that the limestone is 90 million years older than the oldest known animal life. And so he had these fossils that were encased in this rock, and it became very important to quickly determine whether the fossils were animal fossils or animal bodies. At the end of the day, we were able to reconstruct 2 of these fossils as digital models. It appears that they may be actually the oldest animal life found.
One of our current design projects is a project called Reorder, which is a site-specific architectural installation at the Brooklyn Museum. Our proposal, our submittal, called for a transformation of the entire space. The space that's given to us was formerly known as the Hall of the Americas. Now it's known as the Great Hall. Our idea for the project came about through looking at the history of the museum. It's 120 plus years, as well as the architectural details within the space itself that we wanted to engage with our installation. What we propose is to add a new type of architectural ornamentation to the space, to those columns that would transform the entire space spatially as well as how it functions. So it's this idea of ornamentation no longer being decorative but functional.
We're trained as architects. We came out of a really strong 5-year architecture program, but we're interested in using the tools, not only the sort of instruments, but the kind of ways of thinking about space to apply them to a whole host of projects.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at bricartsmedia.org/BIT.